Good afternoon. I'm joined by the CEO of Sparkster, Sajjad Daya, who will be answering a few questions for us today.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
What inspired you to start Sparkster?
That's a wonderful question. Over the years, over the past 15 years, I've been involved in building several companies, all of which are multi-million-dollar companies today. And one of the things that was very challenging to do was to get software built. So back when we started, this was the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of software available for online companies. There was the big companies like Oracle and SAP, but that really didn't work in a startup. It didn't work from the perspective of a small company. And so we really had no choice but to go out there and build our own software to be able to operate our companies. And so I kind of took helm of that, and we recruited some Indian developers to essentially build the software for us. I quickly discovered how challenging this was. So one of the biggest problems we had was that, we'd give them very detailed specifications of what we want them to build for us. And they would kind of take those, they'd read them, and we'd have a lot of meetings about specifically what we want built. Then they'd go off and build something, but it was remarkably or vastly different to what we had described. And this was an iterative process. So they'd build something, then we'd go back and say, hey, you missed this, 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 and this. And then they'd fix some of them and not all of them. And it was a constant back and forth. Out of frustration, one day I just said, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? This can't be working for everybody in the world. And so out of frustration, I said, give me the tools and I'll build it myself. But I realized that, those tools just don't exist. Am I gonna build companies, or am I gonna learn to be a software developer, right? Am I gonna do my job, or am I gonna go out and learn somebody else's job, right? So that's when I thought, we're gonna have to build them. We're gonna have to build the tools. And so that's what we did. We built the tools so that people could build software without having to know how to program, without ever having to learn how to program. So that's kind of how we got here.
Can you tell me any more about the software? What makes it different?
So what makes our software different is that it's easy to use. That was the premise of everything, right? It's got to be easy to use because you're not going to go out there, you're not going to learn software development. The other factor is that you shouldn't know anything about software architecture. You shouldn't have to worry about any of the internal plumbing or the internal details of how software is built. Now, that was one of the ideas or one of the premises that we started with. You should be able to just describe what it is that you want to build and be able to define that in our platform, and then the platform should do the rest. Essentially, one way to think about this is what we've built is a way for software to write software. We've created an autonomous way in which software is written, and that's essentially what's happening behind the scenes. That's the magic behind the scenes. Unfortunately, you can't get away from the fact that eventually software has to be written. It's just that we're writing it in an autonomous fashion for you. The reality is that, if you ask a software developer what they do, the majority of the code that they write, is boilerplate code. And what that means is that it's the same code, whether it's a piece of software for you or if it's a piece of software for somebody else. It's the same stuff. And that stuff, the boilerplate code, is really the plumbing. It's how things talk to one another, it's how things integrate with one another. And so the real opportunity for us has been, how do we take all of that boilerplate code and how do we make it, autonomous? How do we generate that stuff in an autonomous way? And so rather than rewriting it over and over and over again for every application that's built in our platform, we've kind of turned it into a set of components that form our platform. So you're using those boilerplate pieces of code whenever you build an application without having to keep regenerating it. And there's a lot of efficiency that comes from that, as you might imagine.
So why do you think the world will adopt this new way?
I could tell you that it's great technology and it's an improvement in ease of use, right? But the reality is that, you know, we've got to have some hard numbers behind what we're doing, right? So while there'll be, I think, a lot of enthusiasts that will adopt our platform, the rationalists that will adopt our platform will adopt it because it's 100 times faster than software development in the traditional sense, right? That's not really our opinion. That's not a number we plucked out the air. We did a side-by-side comparison of something that's built in our platform and compared to something that's built outside of our platform in the traditional sense. And what we discovered, even to our alarm, I must admit, is that software can be built 100 times faster in our platform. But that's not the only benefit. Because you're only describing what you want to achieve, what some people might call business logic, you also don't need a software developer, right? So not only can we create software at a rate that's 100 times faster than traditional software development, we can do it enormously cheaper because you don't have to hire software developers to use our platform. In effect, the way our platform works is that the business logic, the way your application should work, what it should do, is defined in plain English in our platform. And so those two things combined together are the reasons I think that our platform is not only going to be revolutionary and have a higher level of adoption, I actually think it's going to be disruptive to the traditional way in which software is built, deployed, maintained, and sold. I think that our technology is fundamentally disruptive.
What's the difference between an application developed by a software developer and an application developed by your software?
On the face of it, not a whole lot, not much, right? In reality, if you were to hire your average software developer, they would build a multi-tier application. You would have, your interface, which will be written in some languages like HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. And then you'd have some logic in the middle that is the business logic that I was mentioning. And that would be written in a language, maybe C# or Java or something like that. And then you'd have a database behind the scenes where all the data is stored. And your database would use SQL, and then you'd have some layer in the middle that would allow your logic to talk to your database, something along the lines of LINQ or something like that, right? What I'm really trying to say to you is that you need to know multiple languages and multiple technologies to be able to build software. And although there are full stack developers available, traditionally you tend to have multiple people where each person is focused on one part of that application. You don't do any of that in our platform. You describe what you want, you drag and drop your screen together, you push a button and you're done, right? You don't need to know any languages, you don't need to know about the plumbing or the internals of anything, right? But what makes it different from the same thing that would be built in the way that I just described? Well, there's one fundamental difference, and that is that we're not just building any old software or software in the traditional sense, we're building enterprise software. Now what that means is that there's enterprise level security and there's scalability. That means that scalability means that no matter how many people you throw at your application, maybe you have a seasonal business that increases in demand in Christmas, right? And in that case, you're going to need an application that can handle a lot of volume in Christmas, but maybe not so much the rest of the year. Well, that comes automatically because those platform components that I spoke about, some of those components do the job of scaling out your application horizontally. It means that the more people that use your application, and we monitor that stuff automatically, we clone your application. And if there's still, a lot of people using your application, we clone it again until we've got enough copies of it to handle all the people that are using your application. That isn't something that's easily written, even by very, very skilled software developers. And the other side is security. Security in our platform, it's not an afterthought. It's not something that we thought about at the end or that we put at the perimeter of our application. It's integrated and intertwined in the architecture of our platform. It's in every single interaction that occurs in our platform. Security is at the core of what we do, because it's, we take the data that's going to be on our platform, we take that responsibility very seriously.
So how did you manage to convince your team to make it happen?
I don't know is the answer to that. I can tell you that I'm very fortunate to have a tremendous team. And I don't know why they've stuck with me, but they have. It's taken a long time to build this application. It's taken many years to build it. But what I can say to you is that it's because of them that we're here. It's because of their hard work, their perseverance. It's because of their blood, sweat, and tears, and a countless number of sleepless nights. So, hats off to them. I mean, this is their achievement.
What are the characteristics of people that have been successful in your team?
I would say tenacity, and really what I would say is the people in our team are very passionate, and they really believe in what we're doing. They believe that what we're doing is important. It's not just work to them. Just like me, I believe that this is their life's work. This is, one of the most important things that they may do in their lives. Because you see, our platform contributes to humanity because it enables people to be able to take their ideas and actualize them in software. That's a big deal, because if you think about successful companies, right? Let's look at YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Airbnb, Uber. They're all software companies, all of them. Because innovation today is achieved through software, I think our technology not only empowers people to take their ideas and make them reality, I think it can change their destiny. I think it's remarkable. So I hope that answers your question.
So you claim to be facilitating an integrated app where blockchain, IoT devices, and other software can interact in one platform. How?
It's true that, let me start at the beginning. What we enable people to do is to create software without writing code. The software isn't limited to, applications that are online or, things that you might use on your desktop. There's software that runs on devices. The smoke alarm in your house may have some software running on it. So if we're truly going to enable people to be able to innovate, we have to extend beyond, what the everyday person conceives as software, and we have to stretch our horizons. So two areas that we've kind of chosen to focus on in the short term is IoT and smart contracts. And so in IoT, it's like the smoke alarm. We enable you to be able to write the code that runs on a little device, whether it's a camera or whether it's a mouse trap or whatever it might be. And so you might wonder, well, why would I want to write software for a mouse trap, right? Well, it's actually quite useful. So do you want to keep checking that mouse trap every hour, every day, every couple of days? What if the mouse trap could tell you when there's a mouse in the mouse trap? That's software, right? So we enable you to be able to build all sorts of things. In addition to that, we've also chosen to focus on smart contracts. And so what smart contracts enable you to do is to transact with one another. And that's the key. It's not it's transacting with one another that we think is the biggest opportunity. If you want to capture taxi, you're going to use Uber, which is a massive organization. But what if you want to contract, your neighbor down the street to give you a ride somewhere? Maybe you don't know him so well, maybe he doesn't trust you. And so you need to have a safe way to be able to do business together. That's the key, right? Much like Uber has enabled us to ride in someone else's car, what if we could do those sorts of things without Uber, or without people creating all the different types of Ubers that we may need? I'm currently here in India in our Bangalore office. And one of the things that I see here is I see a lot of people selling vegetables on the streets, and they're kind of pushing these carts along down the street, waiting for someone to come along and buy vegetables for them. Going back to the concept of Uber, someone could use our platform, they could use our tools to build an app where people could order vegetables that they may need, and that order could be routed to the local vegetable cart, the closest one to your house, and they could bring you the vegetables in moments, or fruits, or whatever it might be. They could bring those to your house in just a few minutes. It makes life easier for the end user. It introduces or gives that vegetable stall owner, a new stream of revenue, a new source of income. So it's those sorts of ideas that our platform empowers and facilitates. But like I said, really what I see is one of the core strengths of smart contracts. Not only is there a tremendous benefit in business, but I think that it benefits people to do business with one another.
Okay, so how will the Sparkster app make a big difference for the maker community?
So the maker community are people that are really, from my experience with them, they're hobbyists, and they like to create things for fun, but they also want those things to have, meaningful, practical value. We're working with a few makers today that are using our tools. One of them, who's in the northeast of England, he's created a bar that serves drinks autonomously or automatically. He's created a robotic bar, and our software is powering this robotic bar to, you'll say, make me a martini, and it will, it's got all these different ingredients, or all these different drinks in a how would you say, in like a dispenser, and a cup travels down and it dispenses the right things into the cup based on the order it receives. And our technology is kind of empowering that. You might be surprised to know that whole thing was built without writing a single line of code. Our platform is talking to a Raspberry Pi, and that Raspberry Pi is controlling that device. And that's all built using our Raspberry Pi solution that integrates with our platform, all controlled without a single line of code. But what's also important here is security, right? So that entire communication between our platform and the Raspberry Pi is entirely secure, which I imagine is very important to the people viewing this video. So how do we empower the maker community, to answer your question? Well, that particular individual, I won't name him, but that particular individual, he was complaining about how difficult it is to build, not to build the device itself, but to be able to get that device to communicate with the internet so that he could control it from his mobile phone, so that he could integrate it with other things, right? He could share it with his friends, and maybe they'd go to a website, order a drink, and it would be dispensed by a bar, by the robotic bar. So the reality is that, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, there's a lot of different layers and a lot of different technologies that go into making something like that happen. For that particular person, we eliminated all of the challenges, right? They don't even need to worry about all of that. They grab some blocks that are in English and, describe how they want things to work. They describe what a lemonade is and how a lemonade gets dispensed. And that's it, the thing works. It's quite remarkable. And I think that the people that come along and try our application out, I think they'll discover that for themselves firsthand. It's quite remarkable.
So what inspired you to start your own business?
I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father were all entrepreneurs. And specifically talking about my father, I would say that he's my inspiration for why I'm an entrepreneur today. I spent my whole life watching him run his business. We lived in a little house above a shop, and that was his place of business, the shop underneath. My father's disabled; he has polio, and so the commute and such was a big factor. But to tell you a little bit about him, so he grew up in Tanzania in Africa, and at the age of about 10 or 12, I think, his father was struck on the head by some thieves who were robbing the house. He was struck on the head with a machete. And my father, and so his father got sick, as you can imagine, gravely. And my father was the only one that was really around. So he had to drop out of school at about 10 or 12 years old to run the family business. And what I would say about that is that, although he never had an opportunity to be educated, what he did was, he took over his family business because that's what he had to do. And so he ran the business because that's how food was put on the table. And so, many years after that, he moved to England, and being someone that didn't have an education, didn't have any skills, he almost had no choice but to be an entrepreneur and to start a new business in a new country to provide for his family. So I would say that he's my inspiration, and he's the reason why I'm an entrepreneur today, looking at him. But what I would say about entrepreneurship in general is that, looking at my father's experience, I would say that entrepreneurship is tremendously empowering. You don't need to have any particular skills. You just need to have an idea, and you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe in your idea. And if you can find a way to contribute value to other people, you've got yourself a business. That's what I learned from him, and that's hopefully what our platform will facilitate with people all over the world. It gives them an opportunity and a way to create an income when they don't have one. That's how I personally see entrepreneurship.
So you've talked a lot about your own company. So what is the vision for your company?
I think we've kind of discussed what the vision is, but I'll elaborate on that and I'll specify it. So, what we really see is that we've built a platform that not just enables people to build software, because frankly, so what, right? What I see is that we've built a platform that enables people to be able to take their ideas, like I said, ways in which they feel they can contribute value, and turn those into businesses. That's how I see our platform. It's a platform of empowerment. It's a platform of liberation. And I do believe that it gives people an ability to generate an income when they don't have one.
So, you talked a lot previously about the inspiration you received from your father. So do you think that that's echoed within your vision?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would say definitely in a very strong way. My father, a disabled man with no education, has provided for his family by building a business, and I'd like to be able to provide that to people all over the world.
So besides from being an entrepreneur, what is your biggest dream in life?
Something that I've held near and dear to my heart as a child. I've been fortunate to travel to many places around the world, and some of them many of them have been third world countries. I would say that my dream in life is to be able to help those people to climb out of poverty with their own efforts, give them the opportunities and the tools. I think the opportunities present themselves, but really give them the tools to be able to do that. Sometimes the biggest thing that's missing is education. Sometimes the biggest thing that's missing is electricity, or or water, or some of the most basic things that we in the West take for granted. I hope that one day our platform, people take our platform and use it to solve problems like that bring, meaningful solutions to the people that need it the most, and that our platform becomes a tool of empowerment for them, so that they can change their own world, change their own, their own neighborhoods and their own communities, and live a better life.
How do you think Sparkster will change the world?
If we can empower people to take their ideas, it might be, I once heard in the city of San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken, that they had a problem where they couldn't, maybe it was Toronto, I'm not sure, they couldn't maintain fire hydrants, so they allowed people to adopt a fire hydrant, and it was their responsibility to clean it up and make sure that if a fire truck ever came by and needed to use it, it was easy to find, and it wasn't surrounded by trash or whatever it might be. And so I think it's initiatives like that that change the world, and like I said, I firmly believe that ideas materialized in the form of software, because that's how the world is today, right? It's all about apps, it's all about human-computer interaction, right? So if we can facilitate people doing those sorts of things, I do believe that we will leave a mark on the world and we'll make a positive difference.
Well, that brings me to the end of my questions. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic having you here in our India location.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to say a few words, if I may, to the viewers of this video. Firstly, I want to say that we truly value your contribution, and we truly value your ideas and thoughts, and we want to hear from you. We want you to participate and become part of our movement. We think this is a movement, right? Because sharing this idea and sharing this knowledge is how we collectively can change the world. So I invite you to join us, and I invite you to become part of our movement, become part of this journey to not only enable people to build software, but enable people to be able to change the world, to be able to change their communities, and to help the people around them. Thank you so much for your time.